Life, it comes at us like a train with all its ups and downs, its pains and its joys. How do we deal with it? How do we process it? How how do what we learn from life and especially what we teach life back in return makes all of the difference. Welcome to Life Talks.
We cannot ignore that anger. We cannot ignore that pain. And so I asked you if we can talk about that and to give some, for now, things that they can do to redirect it or to de-escalate this this feeling that we have that we want revenge, but I don't want it at the expense of our children.
It's a great question. I think, sometimes we say, because you hear people talk about this, the concept of revenge is interesting because the best revenge anyone knows, if you live long enough, is living a fulfilled life and giving back to your community. I think about Mr. Antolini's advice to Holden Caulfield in The Catcher in the Rye. The mark of an immature man is that he's willing to die for a cause. Well, the mark of a mature man is that he's willing to live humbly for one. And that's hard for young people to hear sometimes, but living humbly for justice gives us that next layer of mentors who can help people get to the next level. It gives us the teachers, the doctors, the lawyers, the Sunday school teachers, the pastors, the community members who can help school us and bring us up in a manner that helps uplift not just our community, but our neighborhoods, our cities, our states, our country, our world. You think about young people, African Americans, youth, and I want to, cast at large youth in the African diaspora. Nina Simone said it best, taking it from Lorraine Hansberry. Those of us who are young, gifted, and Black, and it was a big tent there, have so much to contribute to go down the path of letting a moment of anger undermine your ability to build something beautiful, whether it is harnessing your expertise in technology or toward healthcare and kind of improving community outcomes of health in our community. And there's so many things that I'm looking at right now. COVID-19 disproportionately impacts communities of color. I need my young people angry about that, but in the laboratories trying to figure out how we deal with that and deal with things like sickle cell anemia and things that have it, and what are we doing in terms of diet and exercise? If you want to punch a wall, that's great. How about thinking about a fitness program for young people to help them, remain healthy and strong for the work ahead? And that means reimagining what we eat, how we eat, what we share, those types of things. There's so many great things for young people to be involved in, but I think the cornerstones are three. Number one, and not a lot of people want to hear this, you got to know your histories, got to read and study. I think that every young person should memorize the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And people go, why do I need to know the 14th Amendment? It's the basis for, as a person of color, I would say that the 14th is as important as the first 10, because so much of that is bound up in, due process of law and, citizenship, fundamental attributes. So that's something, I have a lot of people come to me and go, that's not what the Black Panthers did. I was like, well, the Black Panthers carry guns and law books. And people forget that when they went to these police stops, they actually read the rights to those who were being stopped while the police were there, because the police wouldn't often read the rights. Everybody focuses on the guns and they forget the law books, and that Huey Newton was in law school and he said, we're just going to show up and read people their rights so that they know, what they don't have to answer. They don't have to, so to make Miranda real for them. So the revolution, large writ, is really more than just about being angry or watching, buildings burn. The revolution is about community uplift. The revolution is about giving back. The revolution is about change. Because revolution, as Erica Huggins, the Black Panther, once told me, she said, revolution means change.
Right.
The sun revolves around the. So if we want things to change, what we need to do is to put ourselves in position where constructively we can help lead that change, and not get to the point that we don't do two things. Number one, we can't fall down the trap of losing sight of our shared humanity. South Africa went through this exercise with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. At the end of the day, we got to live with the people that are, and we got to redeem them. So cancel culture doesn't help. We got to redeem people, because the last thing we want folks to do is go home angry, waiting for their chance to get revenge. We have to help them see the error of this thought and to kind of think constructively about how we move the nation as a whole up. And the second is, we really have to invest young people in the idea that, Cardinal Newman called it a second spring. The idea that in the winter of our discontent, we lose sight of the fact that there is a better day, that we can look at in very powerful ways all the things that our people have contributed, that have made beauty for this world. And I'm not just talking about athletes and entertainers. I'm talking about the myriad ways in which Afro-Caribbeans, Afro-Latinos, African-Americans have enhanced our social, political, cultural, and economic landscape. That's part of that history as well. So for me, when I feel that despair, and I think we all do, it's hard not to feel it. It's this reminder that, there's so much more for us, and so much more for us to contribute, and much more. And I'll say this because there's a spiritual component to this as well. So much meant for us to be and to overcome in the process of making what Dr. King called the beloved community. That's what we're meant to uplift.
But isn't that also but isn't that also what protest is?
Yes, absolutely.
And that reimagining, which I feel like this is a theme that we've been interweaving through this conversation, the reimagining of even what a protest is. It's beyond walking the street. It is, I can protest this, that by changing the DNA of what my family looks like, of the professions that come out of this family. So let's start to reimagine what our world should look like and be part of that, and start now. You young people are young, that's why you call young people. You really have a lot of years ahead of you. And those of us now who are older, who would say, oh, wish I used my 20s to do this, because in my 40s, the empowerment that I would have now, take your 20s, and you may have to withdraw from your, social whatever for a little bit. But when you reemerge, you come with those fresh ideas and the backing of education to prove it. You make yourself viable. Make yourself a viable voice. I have one more question for you. So you are an educator, right? And our school system is another hot topic. The curriculum, our curriculum for our kids from kindergarten all the way up, especially when it comes to history, is a problem. It's another systemic problem. Again, rooted way back then. The education wasn't for us. The history was not for us. And it was to showcase a certain kind of America, a certain prosperous America. And we have missed out on many, many, many opportunities to show the true history of it, even though it's uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. I was speaking to the provost here at the school where I attend in another situation we were talking about, and he shared two things to me which stuck with me, and I want to present this to you to see what you think about that. He said in the curriculums, there are two things that a curriculum should show. Number one, it should be a mirror. Our Black kids, our minority kids, as you talk about our shared humanity, If the curriculum does not show me a mirror where I see myself in it, it is whitewashed.
Mm.
Eurocentric.
Mm.
He was plain, and I was like, okay, it's black and white, right? Even talking about the native Indians, Native Americans and so forth. Our curriculum in our schools, which is literally the thing, we send our kids to school for 8 hours a day, and their minds are at the mercy of teachers. And whatever is soaked in there from those impressionable ages of 0 to 7 or whatever the case may be, that's the first look they have at who they are and what their world is, what their nation is. And so the idea of, if the curriculum doesn't show them themselves, it should be thrown away. That's how I would interpret that one. Because it sets them up to believe that they are, as we were told we were, non-human. We're animals. We're not part of the human race, and that sticks in the mind, and we remember that, and this is how we respond to everything. This is how we answer questions when people ask us things, when we go to interviews. Somehow we think it's the resume that should tell for us, but it is what we really think about ourselves. And if we don't see ourselves as part of that space in the community, we will not act like we are. And that starts from those mirrors. And he said the second thing was that it should be a window. It should have windows into what our world looks like, what it is supposed to look like. And I struggle with this because it will take a total overhaul of our education system. And I feel like using the same terminology as with policing, it's either we abolish it and restart it, or reconfigure it. But how do you reconfigure something that was set up from the beginning, not to show you a mirror of yourself because you were not human? People are arguing about it, but I'm really passionate about that because this is where now our young people find out things from the news. And when they go into quote unquote some history books, they're like, wait, how comes I didn't know this? And the anger that comes from this new knowledge and feeling like they had been shortchanged. So as an educator, I do I label myself as an abolitionist or an abolish? Yes, because I believe in the restorative justice module,
Right.
But where education is concerned, it kills me. So where do you stand with that? I know I'm putting you on the hot spot with that, but education is so key. Our kids are not home with us 24 hours a day, and what they're learning is what they take into their everyday and their future. So
it's a great question. Teachers are at a disadvantage because, of course, they have to work with that curriculum, and that curriculum sometimes is set in political spaces. I was part of the New Jersey Amistad Commission, where New Jersey actually introduced African American history into the curriculum, and I got to work on what that curriculum was like, which was mandated for every student in New Jersey. And I was like, this is wonderful.
yeah.
At the same time, as we were doing that, I thought about my own upbringing, and I'll give you a very good example. It's got to be expansive enough that it reflects the full complexity of what it means to be Black in America. So coming up, I remember in the 1980s, we first started getting our waves of West Indian immigrants into the city of Bridgeport. And people were talking about them in the same terms that people talk about, oh, well, you're immigrants, so on and so forth. But at the same time, we're doing Black History Month quizzes and we're celebrating Marcus Garvey, and nobody's connecting that Marcus Garvey came from Jamaica. That Pan-Africanism that W.E.B. Du Bois was talking about and Marcus Garvey was talking about was connecting Europe, America, and Africa. But no, the West Indies. So once you get that empowerment, then you're like, hey, wait a minute. We have to recalibrate here and think about what it means to have an expansive definition of Blackness that lets me see that Constance Baker Motley, who was a woman and lawyer for the NAACP in a moment where it was hard to be Black and a female and a lawyer, who was from the West Indies, was fighting for liberation for my people in the courts through the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. So we have to do the hard work of thinking about that curriculum in a context that says, first and foremost, to everybody in America, but mostly to white America, You need to understand this history so that once you become a police officer, you don't show up in my community with fear. You need to know what contributions we've made to American society and culture beyond slavery. 3, you need to appreciate that this is a broad tapestry of peoples. And depending on where you are in the country, here we have a large Hmong and Somali population. When I got here, I knew nothing, very little about Hmong culture, and even less, I'm ashamed to admit, about Somali culture. You're going to work in this community, you got to get to know those people and appreciate those cultures, because we have to work together to abolish the police or reform the police or whatever it may be. We have that responsibility. And then last but not least, for our own people, because I think this is very important, we got to begin to break down silos and walls in the way that we talk about Blackness, in the way that we appreciate the full range of what it means to be Black. You know, I am Black, yes, but I want to celebrate the aspects of my culture that are African at their core, and all of its complexity. So the continent and then specific regions of the continent, specific nations in the continent. I want to celebrate the full range of what Afro-Caribbean means and what that's, or Afro-Cuban, Afro-Latino, Brazilian. Because when we talk about the great age of emancipation, we only talk about the United States, but Brazil abolished slavery in 1871. Jamaica did it in the 1830s. You know, these are waves where the U.S. emancipation is bracketed by what's happening in the international community. We talk about the American Revolution and the French Revolution. We very rarely talk about the Haitian Revolution. So our people and our cultures have always been at the center of great social, political, economic, cultural inflection points. That's why everybody needs to know African American history, but then African American history should be the springboard for us to then start interrogating, hey, wait a minute, let's go a little bit deeper here and understand, you know, because again, every one of those people, we talk about the triangle trade. That was Europe, Africa, and the Americas and the West Indies. So all of the great people that we're celebrating in African American history originated on the continent and touched the West Indies or American shores at some point. And it's that collective story that we need to tell about who we are, about our people, and about our contributions, because I think that helps to build unity rather than division.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for saying that. You know, I had heard about Marcus Garvey from what I learned in the island, which I was really grateful for that, our history, because in the islands, we get a little bit more than America gets. You know, unfortunately. But it wasn't until I went down to Costa Rica in Limon, and we had an event at the Marcus Garvey down at the port, and at this historic place, and this is where we held our event, and I was like, oh my gosh, how did I not know? And the steep history that in Limon, you know, from those Jamaicans that came down there to work there, and you know, part of the shipping and the trading, and how much he influenced that culture there. But it was just so transformational to stand on those grounds. But then it was a shame to me because I had no idea that that's how deep, you know, it had gone. As you talk about the Pan history, Pan American history, and then to go down to Panama, you know, to the Panama Canal, and then to find out, my aunt had called me and said, hey, check the records, because my grandfather worked on the canal with his brother. And they even said to me, you may find people that think you look like them. And I did. People actually thought that I was, and they told me the part of the country that I'm supposedly from. Having those shared experiences then ties in, to me now it becomes a global community, where it's not just St. Lucian history for me or American history, but I have roots in Panama. I have roots in Costa Rica. And so I call these places my home because I've seen myself, that mirror we talk about. I saw myself in that history. And, you know, man, I wish all of our kids can get those kinds of experiences where it's not just in the books, but they can touch it. You know, they can travel and so forth. So that's my
mirror.
Yes.
I love that reimagine, because that mirror really is the shared humanity.
Yeah.
I have been so edified. I know you have a beautiful voice. So one of the things that I used to appreciate in church is when you'd have this beautiful collection of women of color who have been, you know, we talk about this in history, but we always fail to appreciate the contribution of women of color. So the Black Club Women movement, you know, Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Turrell, Ella Baker much later on with the Civil Rights Movement. the backbone of our social justice movements in this country have always been comprised of women of color. And those women of color have been much more mirrors of that Pan-African experience that you're talking about. So, Amy Jacques Garvey or Ella Baker, this alertness, because in this recognition of what it means to give birth to a nation, right? And the sacredness of the child and how you connect those two, there's a power in recognizing that activism and how it translates, and then how we, in our spiritual gifts, share and give that back. I love that analogy of the mirror, because part of that reimagining then is in seeing in every person their innate value of helping them reach their highest potential. And we don't operate that right now. We operate, we talked about education a little bit with the SAT and other things. We operate on division. Let me prove you're smarter than me so you can get into the best program, instead of what are your spiritual gifts and how do we build those to the highest degree so that everybody's edified by what you bring to the table. In communities of color, that becomes even more important, because there's so many other obstacles that prevent us and divide us. And then we've got to find a space within our own communities to create space to edify in that way as well.
Okay, so now you brought up something. I'll just ask you the question. I know we could talk forever, but within that spiritual space, we know that even when the slaves were emancipated, the church was at the core of their peace, I should say. Whatever that looked like for them, whether it was, with the spiritual songs that they sang to keep their minds from going crazy and so forth. And the church has evolved over the years as a nucleus for the Black community. It sounds like you're saying to me that is still a core component and needs to be more active with that reshaping and dreaming of what we want it to look like. But it seems that even in today, 2020, there's this pushback from churches, all churches. I'm talking about Christendom on a whole, where they want it's hands off. They're afraid to enter into that space. You talked about the coalition and them being burned down. Again, I know with Rodney King, I think it was the AME Church that held the pastors, the religious leaders invited everyone to come in so that they can talk about peaceful protests. And they shared and they poured into the hearts of the people. There were people outside who were angry about it, but the church became a centralized place for the voice to bring in those not buffers, but that leveling of that thinking. But today it seems like the church is saying, hands off. We don't like what this is. Love and peace and Jesus and and whatever. Have we lost our voice?
So I love that question on so many levels, and I'll answer it in a couple of different ways. For me, there was a moment when Al Sharpton was delivering the commemoration for George Floyd that I think it was this moment where for most Americans who don't know that tradition in our community, how faith meets activism, it was on full display in Reverend Sharpton's, eloquent delivery of the reason that we have these challenges is because someone's always had their knee on our neck. Yeah. But the part that he didn't articulate was, but this far by faith, what has sustained us when people have had their knees on their neck, and whether Muslim, Christian, AME, Seventh-day Adventist, Baptist, whatever it may be, it's the collective that we get in the organization that takes place in churches. Charles Payne has written in a book, I've Got the Light of Freedom, about mass mobilizing, mass organizing traditions. But the reality is, it's a joke among activists. Men may lead, but women organize. That's why it's the women's auxiliary of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters that helps that. It's Joanne Robinson and the women who started the Montgomery bus boycott. People like, Rosa refused to give up her seat. But Jean Theoharis talks about this in her book, The Rebellious Life of Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks had been an activist for years, involved in any number of campaigns and connected to the other women, Black women of Montgomery, who were organizing on all kinds of issues. The reason they were able to make that boycott move so quickly is only partly due to Martin Luther King's eloquent delivery at the church that night. It was the fact that these women were organized. And I say all that because when we read faith out of it, then we forget that some of the luminaries in our experience were very much connected to activism through faith. Whether we're talking about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, both ministers, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. I mean, we sometimes not sometimes, we read that out. And in the process, what we do is fail to appreciate the church as an organizing influence and organizing body. Where were they meeting in the South when they were staging for those massive demonstrations and protests? In church. Where did the Selma campaign, the churches were central to that. And it also brought people of different faiths together. So Unitarians are linking up with Baptists, who are connected with Seventh-day Adventists, who are connected with Catholics. And they're all coming together and going, one God, one mission, as you called it earlier, evil. You want to see what evil looks like. This thing here in segregation is evil. And it brought people together. I do worry, Latoya, and I think it's a great point that you make, that in failing to appreciate that undercurrent of it, you lose that opportunity for the mirror that reflects back shared humanity. I love that everybody's in the streets now, but if they go to segregated spaces after they leave those demonstrations, what good will it be? And we all know that the most segregated hour in America, even today, is Sunday morning.
Or Saturday morning.
Or Saturday morning. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely true.
Yeah, just 2 days, the most important, quote unquote, 2 days is where we literally turn back the clock every weekend and go right back to the very thing that we were saying we stand against. And Protestants, with the protest in your name, we shoot ourselves in the foot. And it's something that's a wake up call that we really need to have and to own it. If we're going to stand by what we say we are, we have to walk the walk and talk the talk. Otherwise, we are hypocritical. And someone can really look at us and say, you really don't know your history. Because if you knew your history and where you came from, this stuff that you're doing, or this closing of your doors and your windows and not speaking out against these injustices, you would not. You might as well just park that and go to the beach, go to Lake Michigan. So that's the call, for us today, as we are educated and as we know better. The saying is, when you know better, you do better. You are now accountable for it. We can keep our officials accountable, but if we don't keep ourselves accountable, we might as well park it. And it lends strength to our voice if who we're holding accountable can see that we are doing the same thing, holding ourselves accountable. And that means at the end of the day, being educated. My father always used to tell me, he used to make me sit and watch CNN every day. And then I had to come and tell him as a child what the news said. And he always said to me, it is because I want you to have intellectual conversations and to hold your own, not just as a girl or a woman. I was a little girl then. I said, but you have to know what's going on in your world in the context of where you are. Your island is small. You are small, but I want your brain and your mind to be big so that if anyone asks you what happened in Russia, such and such and such, I want you to not be able to flinch and have that conversation. And if you don't know the rest, figure out the rest. That is something that drove me nuts when I was younger, but I appreciate it now because I am able to hold these conversations and I know that I need to hold myself accountable. And so I think he's proud. But on that note, talking about family, can you share with us the meaning of your name?
My name is Swahili for freedom. My parents spelled it slightly differently. So traditionally it's spelled Uhuru. They added the Y-O, Y-O-H-U-R-U. So it means freedom.
And how fitting. They must have known something or try to imagine the kind of man that you would be. And I am sure wherever they are, they would be proud of you because I believe that even in our talk right now, you have given freedom, even to my mind, but whoever is out there, watching, I hope that some shackle has broken off of you. Even if this was a history lesson or history class, that you know a little bit more, you Black boy and Black woman, and even white woman or Latino, whoever you are that's listening, I hope that this has educated you and given you a taste, whet your appetite for you to know more, so that we can join this humanity fight against the evils that have been set up to eradicate minorities, people of color, Native people. It's, even in the LGBT community, we have to use the same voice to stand up for this evil of dehumanizing God's people and giving them any other title other than a member of the human race. And that's the fight. And if we can do that together, we will win quicker. And think about your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren. The world that we are setting up for them in the next 10 to 15 years really depends on the choices that you make today, and who you hold accountable today. Because as we know, slavery did change our DNA. Those of us who come from descendants of slaves respond with trauma, not knowing where it comes from, but it is in our DNA. It has shifted and shaped us and passed down through our generations. But that human DNA, we can shape and shift to and pass it down in the next 15 years. I expect to see a better world, even in the next 5 years, in the next 3 months, because I think everybody is woke now. Thanks to Corona, that shut us down and made us pay attention. And I appreciate you being part of that voice. I hope I could live up to even a fraction of what you're doing for us. But thank you so much. And I want to invite you back again at some point. I know that you're very busy, but we really, really appreciate you. And do you have any last words for our viewers?
I think you said it all in that last statement. I just feel like this is a moment for us to really make change.
All right. So we'll see you again soon. Thanks again, Dr. Williams.
See you soon.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Life Talks. I hope that you were inspired and that you have felt a rejuvenation in your life. And I hope that what you are saying right now is that the answer that you are given to what life has thrown at you is that I am still here. Email us with your Life Talk ideas at mylifetalkstv@gmail.com. See you next time. Bye.